Today is Friday, September 6th. A new jobs report in the U.S. added 142,000 jobs in August, now weaker than expected for the second consecutive month in a row. Here to break it down, as always, is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Carol Roth, recovering investment banker and author of You Will Own Nothing. So, Carol, break this all down. What do the numbers mean here for the jobs report today?
Well, Joe, frankly, the jobs numbers don't really mean anything because, as we know, they continue to get revised and massaged and changed all the time. We've seen more than 1 million jobs that were claimed disappear via revisions and miscountings over the past years plus worth of time. So, we have to kind of take what it is that we do know and try to make the most of it. Some of the things that stood out to me, other than the slight miss in the number, is just overall, how many part-time jobs are increasing versus full-time jobs, which are sliding. The same sort of plus and minus is going on with those who were born here in the United States versus immigrants. Immigrants are gaining more jobs, while people who are native born to the United States are losing jobs. We have people who are obviously taking on many more jobs, multiple jobs, in order to keep up with inflation. And from the jobs that supposedly were created based on the numbers, a lot of those were government jobs or government adjacent, meaning that they're funded by the taxpayers, versus in the private sector where we saw sectors like manufacturing that have decreased. So overall, the picture for the economy is one that we have been expecting. We're seeing it slow. We're seeing some cracks in the job market. And certainly, I think that this will give the Fed enough of a reason to go through with the expected cut that we're going to see here probably in the next couple of weeks. I do think that the shift that we saw today is that probably they're going to do a 25 basis point cut, and 100 basis points is a percent. So it's 1/4% instead of 0.5%, because they have to thread the needle very carefully between making sure that they bring down rates and they don't completely crash the economy. At the same time, they don't want to cause a panic that becomes self-fulfilling and crashes the economy as well.
Carol, there are, as you mentioned, increasingly a lot of people talking about the rapid increase in foreign-born workers, and of course, for the last 5 years, a decrease that's pretty remarkable when it comes to native-born workers. This appears, so many people are talking about it every time the numbers come out now, that it seems to me that it's becoming an election issue. I'm curious what your thoughts are about why this is happening and to what extent it might play in the elections in November.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that it dovetails into the concerns about the border, the illegals crossing, the number of people who are being granted asylum, even though they don't necessarily qualify for asylum, and the impact of that in terms of jobs. One of the things that we don't know when they talk about immigrants is what the breakdown of that is between people who are legally here as immigrants versus those who are not legally here. And I think that having that level of detail would probably help us part and parcel the story. But the concern, the people that have been born here that have been discouraged to enter the workforce, we don't have the labor force participation, particularly on, in the regards to younger people, younger males that we would like to have, that they're being discouraged and being disincentivized. Well, we have all of these incentives for people who are crossing the border illegally to come here and work. I think that ties all of the concerns between the economy and the border, which are the top two issues, together.
Yeah, and she's gotten the nickname of Communist Kamala, and I would love for you to take our audience through what you've seen from the economic policies that she's put out, because really that's the only policies that we've seen. And honestly, Carol, they're a little shocking.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them, but at the same time, we're talking about things that she's tweeted or have been leaked out by her campaign, because her website still does not have a full set of policy positions, which is insane given the fact that mail-in ballots are going out here in a couple of weeks, and she's just going to, play the role of I'm going to cruise in and try and become the president without really standing behind any of the policies. One of the ones that has stood out to me is she has presented herself herself as pro-worker and pro-small business. And Kamala Harris is pro-worker and small business, much like McDonald's is pro-cows and Popeyes is pro-chicken. The policies that she has enacted or is planning to enact, and those that she has, made the deciding vote on under her administration as part of the Biden-Harris administration, goes in a very different path than the one we want to see. We want to see the unleashing of real growth by reducing barriers, reducing taxes, reducing regulations that make it easier to start and run a business, to hire workers, and the like. Her path is one that we continue to see of putting up those barriers, more regulation, more taxes. And the one that really stood out to me is the PRO Act, which is this anti-gig worker, anti-independent contractor initiative that is being pushed by unions that takes the language from California's terrible AB5 rule and makes it national. And so this means that if you are somebody who works independently and wants to work independently, as most of those who work independently do, that you won't have that opportunity. A company to bring you on can't hire you as a contractor. They must bring you on as an employee, which costs a lot more money and has, all kinds of additional regulatory and bureaucratic burdens associated with it. And so the idea that we now have almost or more than 70 million gig and independent contractor workers, plus more than 33 million small businesses that rely on contract work in order to be able to grow. I don't know how she continues to characterize herself in that way.
Now, something that everybody cares about because they all go to the grocery store and buy food. We've talked about the razor thin margins of grocery stores before, but since Biden took office, we've seen the grocery prices have just continued to skyrocket. They're up 25% compared to the 4 years ago. So, Carol, how much longer can Americans keep living like this before something has to give?
I mean, we're seeing the numbers on their personal balance sheets. There is a rate called the personal saving rate, which shows how much of income is being saved. And that is at a historic low number, not the lowest in history, but among them, under 3%. I believe it's 2.9%. And the historical run rates of over 8%. So we've seen that come down. Before COVID, it was close to 8%, something like that, 7.7 or the like. So we're seeing that people's savings are coming down. At the same time, we're seeing a record amount of household debt on their balance sheets. And so we know that more and more consumers are dipping into their savings and they're taking on debt just to keep pace with the normal cost of living. And obviously, that margin is starting to run out. And so as that depletes and the fact that wages are not keeping pace with inflation, that becomes a very challenging situation for individuals. And we saw a report come out of one of the mainstream media outlets this week that people are having to make choices between food and rent. I mean, this is crisis level stuff for many Americans, yet you have the mouthpieces, the economic quote unquote experts that are really Democratic propagandists thumbing their nose and saying, no, look at the chart, it looks great, when really America's middle class is struggling.
Let's hope that everybody can figure this out before November. Carol, thanks so much for the update.
My pleasure.
The AP is caught spreading some fake news. Chris Bedford will be on to explain how they warped J.D. Vance's words after this. You just heard it from Carol Roth. Americans are hurting financially and healthcare costs are completely out of control. And we all know that government isn't the answer. So where can you turn in times like this? Well, take a look at Lassie Health. That's Laasy, because Lassie Health isn't health insurance, but it is the access to the healthcare that you want without all of the red tape, all those restrictions and inflated costs, because coverage starts at just $30 a month. And with that, you can get the transparent pricing, comprehensive coverage tailored to your needs and that of your families. And it's just the access to all of the healthcare services that you want without breaking the bank. And there's no annual or lifetime cap on services. And you can start a plan at any time because it's not healthcare. You don't have to wait for open enrollment. So you can get over 400 prescription medications for free included in your plan, and lab tests up to 60% off, image testing up to 75% off, and procedures and surgeries up to 50% off. So when I say Lassie Health is a game changer, I mean it, because check out their affordable plans that can put you in control of your healthcare at healthylink.com/blaze. For a limited time, get your first month free up to $100 off eligible plans. So get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy without breaking the bank at healthylink.com/blaze. There was a horrific school shooting in Georgia this past Wednesday, and vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance took to X to express his sympathy for the victims and their families. And in response, the Associated Press completely twisted his remarks. Now, here to discuss is Chris Bedford, senior editor for politics and Washington correspondent for Blaze Media. So, Chris, how did the AP distort J.D. Vance's comments?
Well, the AP's had it out for JD since he was made vice presidential candidate by Donald Trump. There's been a couple stories they've ended up embarrassed about or having to delete or rework, and this is just the latest. JD Vance talked about how he was so saddened that school shootings had become what appears to be essentially a fact of life in this country. They happen every school season. School season just kicked off the past few weeks, and already we've had one. The attention-seeking behavior, the media responses, mental illness, internet communities, all of these things feed into this epidemic, essentially, that's gone throughout the country. And I don't use that word lightly. I think epidemic is used too often because it means something that's contagious. But the attention-seeking behavior of this sort of murderous activity seems to be contagious. Now, the AP took that and said, J.D. Vance, school shootings, a fact of life, as if he was just talking about the way the leaves fall in certain regions in the fall or the way it gets colder in winter. That's such a gross misrepresentation. Now, they quickly had to delete that tweet. They had to rework the headline. And the fact that it went through their actually pretty rigorous editorial processes shows how many people along the way or truly have it out and just don't have any honesty left in them in the Associated Press, despite being a wire service. And by the time they got a new one up, it didn't matter. The Harris campaign had retweeted it. I read in a newspaper this morning in England a headline that just mimicked and repeated this garbage. So even though they've since apologized and backed up, and there'll certainly be no talks about disinformation or anything like that, the word is out there. Misinformation is spreading. And I guarantee if you live in Massachusetts or Portland or some other state, you're unfortunate enough to do that, you will hear from your friends and neighbors who are Kamala supporters this repeated to you like it's fact sometime in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Chris, it truly is remarkable. And we've seen the media sort of evolve over the years to the point where now it really is, it's really base and sort of vulgar. It's just like people throwing stones at each other. And in this instance, what I want to drill in on is the transformation, though, of J.D. Vance. So we will all recall here that we spoke not so many weeks ago about, how Vance was this terrible pick and he's just really bad. He's hurting Trump in the media. And, the flip side of this is that I know a lot of people who would laugh at those remarks now because he is so sharp and he's so much of an attack dog. You have lots of people even around this network saying, wow, this guy's one of the best, if not the best vice presidential candidates on the stump and talking to the press that we've ever seen. What do you think about that?
I remember at the Republican National Convention that rooms filled with more conservative MAGA types, there was a lot of toast to J.D. Vance. But the general feeling amongst kind of D.C. Beltway Republicans was, wow, this is a risky bet made from a position of strength. Vance was someone who had bumped up against some Republican orthodoxies of the past couple of years. Actually, not just bumped up against them, run full speed at them. And of course, there was worries, even amongst his own team, that in the weeks afterwards, the level of negative attacks he got and the weakness of the national campaign in responding really he was taking on water. It's never good to be a right-hand man who causes your principal, in this case, Donald Trump, to get negative press. Not most politicians don't like that. Donald Trump particularly doesn't like that. But in the weeks since he's been unleashed, since he's been allowed to go on camera, people have started to realize what we talked about at the beginning, which is true. He is one of the most eloquent and persuasive spokesmen for the Make America Great Again philosophy that there are in this country. He lived it. He grew up in it. He diagnosed a problem before he could figure out a cure. In his best-selling book, made it into a movie, Hillbilly Elegy. He goes into these places, a fairly amateur politician. It was only a few years ago I interviewed him when he was still considering whether or not he should run and was asking our opinion. I'm glad I said yes, of course. I'm sure that's what pushed him over. He has come out as one of the more eloquent spokesmen for this. When you combine people like him and RFK Jr. and Elon Musk, these are not folks who were really around in 2016. The MAGA movement was something that was pushed out by Donald Trump, a couple of us, Sohrab Ahmari. It was not a broad thing. They didn't have the popularizers that now in 2024 you're really seeing epitomized by Vance.
You mentioned RFK Jr. and mail-in voting was supposed to start in North Carolina today, but they had to delay the vote because RFK Jr. has a lawsuit to get off the ballot there. So first of all, how is early voting already starting potentially today? And what do you expect to see happen as this kind of plays out in the next days and weeks ahead?
Early voting ballots being printed, like you said, it's supposed to be today. It's part of this progressive American fetishization of democracy, of the vote, as opposed to one man, one vote on election day. It has become this thing where, well, if you ask who someone is or where they're from, or if they're allowed to be voting at all, and if you don't give them months and months to do it, then it's basically disenfranchising them. You're the Ku Klux Klan, you're Jim Crow. And that's, of course, completely insane. But a lot of states have bought into this. And people who want to safeguard the republic and safeguard the ballot box are put in a bad position of having to be the person who says, no more sugar. This is the parent who says, no more sugar. This is bad for you. Because the other side is saying it should be easier and easier and easier and easier to fulfill your duties as an actual citizen. But North Carolina, probably for the best, was actually finally held up. And the court said, listen, you need to take RFK off this ballot. He's no longer running for president. We're going to grant him this. It's kind of amazing to see how easily Joe Biden's removed from the ballot and replaced by Kamala Harris, but how hard it is for RFK Jr. to remove his name from the ballot. It's almost like these things have a slant in a certain direction. Now, North Carolina does matter, though. It's a state with close polls. Donald Trump or Kamala Harris could win this thing. And taking RFK's name off the ballot is good for Trump. And I think it's a good sign for Republicans in general going into November.
Chris, going back to the vice presidential candidates, we have two things happening in parallel, in reverse. On the Republican side, you had people say, as we just discussed, oh, J.D. Vance, very risky, don't know about this. And then all of a sudden, as he started to speak, maybe we need to hide him. And then he started to speak more. This guy's great. Get him out there. He's a fighter. On the other side, we heard how great Tim Walz was. Look at Middle America. Great guy. He's incredible. And now I'm sort of looking around. Where is this guy? What's going on here? He's MIA.
Well, we've been sold a myth of Tim Walz, just like we've been sold a myth of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is cool. Everyone likes her. She's always been great. Well, that's not the reality, and anyone who has a memory of at least a year can recall that. And Tim Walz is the assistant coach of America. He's America's dad, but in reality, he is a hardcore leftist who's more at home keeping people in their homes in his state than he is with in-laws for Thanksgiving. They all appear to be voting for Donald Trump as far as it looks. He's in a bind here. He's got two things playing against him. One, the principal, Kamala Harris, is doing no interviews. So for him to go out would just draw the contrast to her Wizard of Oz campaign even more sharply. Now back to that weird thing we had, this kind of obsession with just democracy for democracy's sake and this vibes campaign that we're having. Kamala Harris seems to be holding up based on that strategy of hiding from the press. But the second reason Walz can't go out is because there are no policies. what would he defend? How would he be able to actually explain his principles, Kamala Harris's policies, when she has none? All he can do is possibly get in trouble. So by showing up in public, it draws attention to her not being in public. And by debating, he has to actually set policies. And both of those are completely anathema to the Democratic ticket.
Well, I can't wait for things to start heating up on the campaign trails as well as there in D.C. because we've been waiting for September 9th for so long, Bedford, for Congress to come and get back in session. I'm sure that you are going to have a lot for us coming up on Monday.
It's going to be a big week, so tune into the Beltway Brief. I'll preview it all.
Sounds good, and we'll be talking to you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
You too.
James Poulos will explain how big tech companies are creating the cult of Kamala. You don't want to miss it. Founder mode is the latest mentality taking Silicon Valley by storm. And this new trend is about daring to innovate, hustle, and think like a tech founder. In a recent article for Blaze News, Blaze TV host James Poulos explained the false founder mode fandom being created around Kamala Harris, and he joins us right now. So can you first of all explain what this founder mode means?
Yeah, sure. Well, it can mean many things to many different people, but the basic idea is to strike a contrast between the way that businesses are run with a sort of managerial kind of structure and approach, with the way that businesses are run if the founder is the guy in charge and he sort of moves throughout the hierarchy and, skips levels of reporting to deal with people and is kind of like always very nimble and very ambitious. It doesn't sound like rocket science, but there is this desire to shift away from the kind of corporate governance by management and move it into something that's a little more human, I think.
So maybe let's first, before we delve into this, let's get into some examples of what this would look like. My impression is founder mode is, Steve Jobs founding Apple. It's all in, all or nothing. There's no managerial style. He's not just giving everyone their set roles and sort of letting them go down their lanes. He's doing that maybe somewhat, but he's still very much involved in every aspect. And he's not just letting people be in lanes. He gets in the lane if he needs to and fixes what he needs to. That he's almost maniacal about every aspect of the company, as opposed to sort of the quiet manager. Should we say more about that? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think there's an unflattering contrast that tech guys want to strike between themselves, who are cool and innovative and hands-on, and the kind of legacy institutions where the big human resources departments and a lot of like sort of passive, aggressive monitoring of people and doing things through this rigid hierarchy.
Yeah, let's make it clear. I mean, they're talking about when you say manager, we don't mean something good in this instance. There's a negative connotation of the sort of CEO that you see a lot of in the last 10, 20 years, who really is like the captain of a very large ship, and he almost can't do anything wrong. Other people are navigating, right? It's an enormous organization, and they're sort of managers for a while, trying not to rock boats, and then they move on after 3 to 5 years to another company. And really what my interpretation, what the tech guys are saying is that's not the real leadership we need, and we should just be vocal about it.
I think if you could boil it down to one sentence, it would be bureaucracy bad. This is kind of the spirit of Elon Musk volunteering himself to Donald Trump to come in and create government efficiency. He's like, I don't even need a title. Just like, let me get in there and I'll just do to the government what I did to Twitter, which is fire everyone, almost everyone.
Yeah, so you're taking it into the election, and they're trying to get it over on the Kamala Harris campaign. So how does this term relate over there? What are they trying to do with this?
Oh, I mean, I think that it's, Kamala Harris is representative of the bureaucracy, the government bureaucracy and rule by bureaucracy. And, it doesn't really matter who your president is, as long as you have the bureaucracy in charge.
Yeah, I mean, that's the striking thing about everything that's going on around. You wrote about this, James, already, saying that the whole presidency seems fake. It seems like we're in a simulation. It's a fake election because, after all, if we do have Joe Biden, decrepit Joe Biden, sitting down. Did you see that video out there of him in the tiny desk?
Yes.
Like him just sitting down on the tiny desk, right? Yeah. The whole thing looks like it's fake. Then she's a fake candidate without any policy, who's full of joy. and that would be the managerial right CEO that everyone sort of salutes and is really an empty suit.
Yes, you're saluting the org chart more than you're saluting the person at the top.
So what would happen to founder mode then as companies grow and evolve, right? Like, that's what I want to know as things get bigger. He said Steve Jobs, so you can be one of the largest companies in the entire world and still have founder mode. But at some point, would you want to evolve out of this as a company?
Well, I mean, you've seen it happen. You've seen it happen to Google is a big example. You know, they used to be really at the top of the tippy top of the stack, and now you have OpenAI coming in and really is challenging, overthrowing Google's privileged position. And I think a lot of that, this goes back to, you know, Peter Thiel years ago saying they don't know what to do with their money. They've sort of forgotten how to innovate. They're just sort of sitting on it, waiting for something to happen, or just like passively earning, you know, cash off of it. The founders of Google, you know, haven't really distinguished themselves for much except maybe their taste for yachts and partying lately. So it is an issue. And I think that's why you see like serial founding, you know, where guys will sort of ramp something up and get an exit and sell it. And then they'll want to like jump onto the next thing. It can turn in the direction of becoming a cult leader instead of becoming a manager. But, you know, these are the risks.
So I want to say this and get your thoughts on it. I love this. I love founder mode for these reasons. I think they're right about the problem we have in our society, obviously, with leadership and management, et cetera. I'm on their side, and I know that they need a name for it, right? And there's a lot you could say about this name, founder, which used to mean something else, not founder of a business, but maybe a nation. So I get founder mode, like it's great, and they should promote that. But the thing that bothers me about it is there's something cringeworthy in my mind about having to write this down or come up with a name for something that really is just, top quality leadership.
Yeah, what is the line from Wayne's World? If you have to ask, you'll never know.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's kind of a bit like that. And but look, I mean, it used to be that there were many different industries or walks of life from which competent and confident male leaders would rise up, and they could fill public office. They could fill roles in government. And we're now in a situation where, you know, for many reasons, there's really only one place where you can go and find a lot of young, ambitious, focused, competent men. And that's the tech industry. Now, whether that's healthy or unhealthy, you know, I think is for all of us in our hearts to decide. But there is a reason why this stuff is kind of being turned into a cultural sales pitch of sorts, where, you know, they're really having to kind of like spell it out for people. People are everything's up for grabs. Some of the most basic concepts, things that we all used to think we could build a consensus around, that's all sort of being blown to the winds. And in a moment like that, you look around for someone who, well, at least this guy is just head down, honey badger, founder mode, whatever you want to call it. At least they're out there just actually doing stuff. And those figures start to gain significance, even if at the end of the day, they might be serving the algorithm more than they're serving their fellow man.
You mentioned Elon Musk earlier and Donald Trump and potentially being in the administration. Do you think that there is actually a chance that if Trump does somehow win in November, whoever he brings in can actually make significant changes within the government itself?
I think so. And part of that is because checking in on government employees right now, they're probably not doing very well. A lot of them are genuinely overworked. Like, you look at what's going on with the IRS, like this is an agency in crisis. You've got people there who aren't very competent, and they know it. Things are getting worse in America. And, you know, if you're sitting there in DC and you're sitting there at your desk in your corner of the bureaucracy, you're increasingly aware that the scale of the problem is greater than what you can handle. So I think there are a lot of people in the bureaucracy who maybe used to be comfortable and just sat back and, you know, were earning their paycheck or waiting for their pension or whatever, who are now starting to sweat a little bit. And if Trump comes back in, they're going to be sweating harder, and they're going to be crying more, and they're going to be looking for the exits.
You say they're incompetent and they know it. I might push back on that part, but other than that, James,
you can run, but you can't hide.
Good stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. A new documentary on the Blaze highlights how the taxpayers were scammed during COVID. Alex Stein will give us a sneak peek at Scandemic next. The Paycheck Protection Program, better known as PPP, was a federal pandemic initiative that was supposed to help struggling businesses cope with the lockdowns. But instead, they became a source of major fraud, as Blaze TV host Alex Stein exposed in the latest for Blaze Originals, Scandemic, how fraudsters cashed in on billions exclusively on Blaze TV.
The Paycheck Protection Program, also called PPP, was supposed to keep you employed during COVID. But what happened?
The government's just handing out money.
How much you get the PPP loan for? They gave me $3 million. We all know they did PPP fraud.
Everybody in Ohio.
1.2, 3.9, 4.4 million.
If you have a business, DoorDash, if you do Instacart.
Why didn't I get in on the action?
The biggest fraud in government history.
Alex joins us now. So take us through this documentary. What was the biggest thing that you found when making this?
Well, we talked to FBI agents. We talked to, Peter Schiff, who's a big-time financier. And what I noticed was like the fraud. So if you were a company and you had over 300 employees, you weren't eligible for it. But these really smart people that own these companies would break their companies down into like 100 people and break their companies into like 3 different companies so that they could take advantage of this program. So those are the smart scammers. There's all kinds of higher level scammers. And then there's kind of the small time scammers that people said they worked for DoorDash and somehow got, $100,000 in PPP loans. And we talked about an ex-NFL player that got nearly $200,000 in PPP loans and spent it all at the Hard Rock Casino in Tampa, Florida. So it's unbelievable that the government tried to help people, but of course it got taken advantage of, and us as the taxpayers are on the hook for it all.
Let me talk about this. I want to talk about an old story and a new story, and just talk about the relevance of this issue, because for the last almost decade now, there's been a survey that comes out every year about Americans' greatest fears.
Yep.
And the greatest fear in America, more than death of a loved one, more than a natural disaster, is the fear of government corruption. And I think this story goes right to the heart of that. Right. So the old story. Respond to this. No one knew this was happening, right, in the beginning. And I had this friend call me up and say, I work for, and this woman worked for one of the nicest department stores in LA. And I noticed there's a lot of people here buying stuff, and they're not the usual, class of people coming in. There's a lot of people buying things in this fancy department store that normally I just wouldn't see here. And everyone knows it's happening, and no one knows how, and no one knows where the money's coming from, because there's rumors that there's, some Daddy Warbucks billionaire like giving out money, or some kind of crime syndicate, and no one really knew what was going on. And lo and behold, it was PPP, right? Fraud happening. Now, a recent story, just today, right? Governor Walz is being busted for letting another one of these scandals go involving $250 million, right? And a nonprofit. So, I mean, you've surveyed this entire landscape. Tell us about just how big this is.
Well, this is the problem here in America, and you could say it's all over the world, but we have serious cognitive dissonance where everybody knows in their heart that the government has lied to them about something. They know the government doesn't have to tell the truth. That's why there's, different levels of clearance, and that's why there's, confidential information that we're not going to be privy to. But even on top of that, knowing that the government lies to us, people still trust the government. And that's what makes me so mad, is how do you not lose trust in the government at this point? So with the PPP stuff, you had people like the Los Angeles Lakers, one of the most famous franchises in the world. They're getting PPP loans. You had a lot of famous actors and athletes that were getting it. And, people are they're kind of numb to that because of cognitive dissonance. They're not even worried about it. But now you see Governor Walz and, the fraud that we see right in front of our faces. People are just almost desensitized to it. And I think that's one of the issues that we're having with kind of waking people up, is people will find out that Governor Walz did a whole illegal funding thing through COVID, and they're not even going to give a damn, sadly.
No, unfortunately, I have a conscience, and I couldn't go through and just steal money. But apparently, that's what everyone was doing. So when you look at it, this, we've been talking about how deep this goes, and just the level of corruption that is in there. Is the government doing anything about this now to try and get it back?
Actually, they are. There's, a whole FBI task force that's dedicated to going after people that did fraudulent loans, and there's people that are snitching on people. So there is an infrastructure to catch people that were doing the fraud. But, I mean, really and truly, it is an uphill battle. We talk to the FBI agents that do this because it is hard to prove that it was fraudulent. In some cases, sometimes the they didn't steal enough money to make it worth their time to investigate. So it's just it's an uphill battle, but it was free money. People were able to take advantage of it. And like I said at the beginning, we are on the hook for all this. And did it boost the economy a little bit? Yeah, of course it did. But now with inflation and just printing all that money during COVID, we're totally screwed now.
Man, after just even seeing that trailer, I have the same question you did. Like, why didn't I get involved in it?
I know. That's what I'm saying. We all should have gotten more PPP loans. See, that's what frustrates me is really and truly, I'm not, the people that needed it, I'm happy they got it, but I'm just upset that they made it so easy. And you know what they did is they relied on the banks to basically approve the loans. And of course, the bank is going to approve the loan because they want the money from the government. So, it was just, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. These banks were soliciting people to give money to during this.
So you say everyone's desensitized to corruption, et cetera.
Yeah.
Was there anyone in the course of this entire process that actually felt bad for taking the money?
Not that I talked to. No, I didn't talk to anybody. The people were mad that they didn't get more money. That was the answer that I got more often than not.
Primetime 99, Pimp on a Blimp. Mm-hmm. How's the show going? What's coming up? And honestly, the one thing that I care about is when is JVT's baby coming back on the show?
Oh, the baby's coming back very soon. And, we have a special guest for 9/11 coming up. That's very sad, the 23rd anniversary of that. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be a special show with the Pimp on a Blimp on the Blimp. And you know how it is with this election coming up, guys. I'm worried. I'm really, really worried. You guys were talking about J.D. Vance. We talked about Trump. But I would never have imagined that all these people that are supporting Kamala now don't realize that she's in office right now. They're acting like it's a new. I'm just like
she's the vice president right now.
Like she's a new person. I'm like, she's been here. She can solve these problems. Why aren't you pressuring her now to do it? So I guess I underestimated how stupid the American people are, including myself. I'm not saying I'm some genius person, but for all these people to get behind her and act like she's some new force in the political sphere, she's literally the vice president. She should be fixing the problems that she's talking about on the campaign trail right now while she's in office.
So she's in office, and also Joe Biden is still in office. Yeah. By the way, not that anyone gives a damn apparently about billions of dollars in fraud, right? Or the old man who's decrepit and no one thinks has a sound mind. I feel a lot like what you're describing. I think about this every day when I look at this stuff and just think, does anyone care, right? That is kind of a deep question though right now. Like, what will it take to get people to say enough is enough or just to do anything?
Well, I don't know what will motivate people to actually care because they're worried about their bills or worried about their kids or worried about, a litany of other issues. But what I'm kind of wondering is, we've had a lot of breaking news stories, to say the least. But I think the biggest breaking news story is I do think that they're going to make Joe Biden step down and they're going to make Kamala Harris the president before. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to happen before November, but I know it will happen before the next president is inaugurated.
Yeah. We really appreciate you coming in, Alex. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure. Love the studio. Love the show. Thank you for having me.
And we will be right back with more with our next guest explaining just exactly how to straighten out everything with your clothes. Don't go away. Our latest Blaze original documentary is pulling back the curtain on the fraud that went down during that time. In our new documentary, Scandemic, How Fraudsters Cashed In on Billions, is not just an expose, it's a wake-up call. So we dig into the murky world of PPP loans, showing you exactly how some people game the system while you were just trying to keep the lights on. And let me tell you, it's shocking, but it's also exactly what we've come to expect when you mix big government and a crisis. But there's more. This documentary doesn't just tell the story. It brings to life with the help of Alex Stein, who you know for his no-holds-bar and in-your-face style. Alex gets to the heart of the matter, confronting the fraudsters on the street and asking the questions that we all want answers to, but maybe not the answers that you'd expect. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. So if you want to know more about where your tax dollars are being wasted, you have to head over to the latest Blaze Original, which is available now at blazeoriginals.com/BNT, and subscribe for a 7-day trial plus $30 off with the promo code SCANINFORMED. But most of all, you'll be ready to take a stand. Are you ready to step up your style game and become a true Iron Man? No, we're not talking about the superhero. It's time to bring some humor into the world of personal grooming, and we're going to start with your wrinkled wardrobe. So let's dive into the simple yet powerful act of ironing and why paying attention to your clothes can boost your confidence and make you feel unstoppable. Fashion writer O.W. Root wrote for the beauty of ironing clothes in a recent article for Align on theblaze.com, and he joins us now. So O.W., take us through your philosophy. What is the significance of the mundane morning routine like ironing?
When we think about ironing, think about it starting your day. Think about it like starting your day with intention. Instead of just rolling out of bed and just picking up anything from the dryer, picking up anything from the dresser, it has to do with intention. It has to do with careful intention. It has to do with something that sets your whole day up. And it sounds small. It sounds mundane. It is mundane. But those brief moments of actually quiet, because you can't do anything else. You can't be online. You can't be in the digital world. You're right in front of your face. You're right in front of your hands. You're really engaging with the world. And it is mundane, it is small, but it's creating a certain sort of attitude. It's starting your day with intention. It's starting your day with care and a certain sort of putting yourself together rather than just a careless sort of throwing on whatever's in the dryer.
Okay, I get what you're saying. I will say some words of agreement at the end, but first let me just bring out something personal from me. Usually I like the old stuff, and I get the point. But ironing, the iron hasn't changed. I look at the thing, right, and it hasn't changed in like hundreds of years. You get this thing hot and have to put it in your clothes, and every time I just see an iron, I think, we haven't figured out a better way to do this? I mean, I can stream video live on a plane, right? And it goes up in space and not. And yet I have to take a rock and get it hot and rub it on my clothes carefully still.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, this really speaks to the ancient and archaic elements of classic style. We still, if you're going to wear something that's cotton, if you're going to wear something that is 100% natural materials, it can't be hacked in a certain way. Unless you want to put sort of synthetic materials into your clothes, you really can't hack it. And it's kind of interesting with what you said, because we can hack things with technology, with internet connectivity. I mean, we can't hack this. It is still the physical world. It's kind of how we can't teleport. We still have to move physically. And so you're right. The iron hasn't changed in so long. You go back to those those museums. They have those irons that they used to put in the fire and put on your clothes. They pretty much still look the same today, except for they have a cord. And that does speak to almost this unchangeable, unhackable element of it.
So first thing, after you went through like a little bit of your morning routine, I'm going to need an entire morning routine and day in the life of O.W. Root video, because those are so popular. And I feel like you would have a very good one. But also, kind of to Matthew's point, steaming. Does steaming replace ironing? Is that suitable? Because that's what I do, because I have found out the hard way that I have a lot of those fabrics that don't agree with the iron very well.
For sure. I think this is a bigger problem with women's clothing, because women's clothing tends to have more stretch, just the nature of the style and everything. And so steaming is going to be a better option. For men's clothing, if you're wearing something that is a non-iron, must iron, as we call it, 100% cotton, it's going to be wrinkly. And a steamer probably won't take everything out, especially if you're line drying. And a lot of guys line dry. I line dry because it's better for your clothes, but it's going to be hard to get everything out with a steamer if you're talking about a 100% cotton shirt. And so an iron cranked really hot with a lot of steam is going to be ideal. A steamer is good for certain pieces that you just can't iron, sport coats, stuff like that. A steamer is going to be really good for guys, but a steamer tends to be better for a lot of women's clothing, I think.
Okay, you have shamed me into acknowledging the point. I think what I love about this is the fact that, like you say, you can't hack it and you can't think about anything else when you do it, and there's attention to detail. And I will reveal another story. When I was at my in-laws for a period of time writing my dissertation, I did the dishes every night with the family there, right? And there was something about that was almost therapeutic when you looked at it the right way. Can you say more about this? What do you think what's the magic here? Like, why does this work for people in today's society, and why do we need these moments so badly?
I actually thought about the dishes as a perfect example, because when I was writing this, the dishes are a perfect other point where you can't do anything else. There is something about that steam as well. There's something sort of moving. There's something about the hot water. And we are so sucked into the digital realm. We're in it all the time. All of us, we're always on our phones. We're checking notifications. We're tweeting. We're posting. We're doing all this. We're slinging emails. Boom, 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 all the time. Unless something forces us out of that, it's hard for us to take time. It really is. I mean, it is for me. And when you have something like ironing or doing the dishes, it forces you. You cannot be checking your phone. And it brings us back into, it sounds funny to almost call it a secular right, but it allows us to just be and even let our thoughts wander a little bit. And it can even be almost introspective in a sense. And we need that. I mean, we need that so badly. And it helps us stay a little sane, even if it's just 5 minutes doing the dishes. And it sounds mundane, and it is. But sometimes there's beauty in that mundanity.
That is a perfect way to end that. OW, thanks so much for joining us and bringing us a new perspective on that as well.
Thanks for having me. And
Peterson, that's what Align is all about, just trying to figure out how to do things in a different way. And a lot of this is just returning to ways of life that we used to go by all the time. This was our everyday.
Yeah, it's being intentional about it. I mean, what he's saying here is just to think about how you can dignify in a human way even the smallest things that you do throughout your day and make them meaningful and make them integrate your life in a way that will just make you happier. And I think, it sounds silly, but it's not. I mean, I think he's making a profound point about those moments we need outside of all the bells and whistles getting in our face.
All the bells and whistles in founder mode, even potentially.
Yes. Yeah. So founder mode, I think it's cringe to talk about founder mode, just be a founder. But at the same time, I think what those guys are saying is absolutely true. And everyone knows we need the kind of leadership that just doesn't stop.
It doesn't. And what I'm looking forward to is hopefully in November, no more government corruption. If we can get there at some point, it's still going to be there. But let's aspire to something greater than what we have right now. That's going to do it for us. Be sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to rate and review the show. We'll be back with more on Monday.